The Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I say to the member who's just resumed his seat, the name of the park's going to be Berry Jerry Park, or the Jerry Brownlee Memorial Park. But I also say to Mr Finlayson, I have beaten him twice at an election and I'm looking forward to thrashing him for a third time at the next election. Mr Speaker, can I begin also by wishing you well in your new role as our High Commissioner in London. You have been a very good speaker and you have given me a very fair hearing. I just hope that you've given a few pointers to the next speaker so I can continue my very good relationship with the Chair. Mr Speaker, Prime Ministerial statements. Well, I've listened to a few. Some have been substantial and enlightening. Some have been about real policies that will be implemented. Some have been about challenges and opportunities. And some are believable. Then there's the other sort. There's the bluster, the blatherskite, the blame shifting, and another word that starts with B that you know a lot about, Mr Speaker, animal manure. Yesterday, John Key, in his 5th Prime Ministerial statement, was in the other sort category, because after 5 years of Prime Ministerial statements, he finally got around to mentioning one of the big issues facing New Zealanders today, that of affordable housing, an issue that ordinary Kiwis, hard-working Kiwis, are very concerned about. Well, he got 13 lines in his speech. That was all he was prepared to commit to the issue, but there was no policy, there was no program, there were no ideas, just a handful of meaningless words. He said this: we need to build more houses at a lower cost. He said we need more land. He said we need more streamlined processes, and he said we need to be more proactive. So you add those 13 lines up, and the conclusion is a big fat nothing, because there was a lot of needing going on, but not much was rising. So I have no idea how they're going to go about housing affordability in New Zealand. But he did manage to do a lot of ad-libbing about Labour's Kiwi Build policy. And what I know, Mr Speaker, is we have got the National Party rattled on this policy, because I have never seen the Prime Minister fizzing, frothing and fibbing as much as he has been over Kiwi Build. And then we watched Bill English today. He got to his feet and he spat and he yelled and he screeched all about Labour's housing policy. I am delighted, absolutely delighted. We are talking about Labour's housing policy. The whole country's talking about Labour's housing policy. Why? Because the public like it. They like it. And in a recent survey, 70% of New Zealanders said they like Kiwi Build. They like the idea there will be 100,000 affordable houses built in New Zealand over the next 10 years that are going to give our young people a chance to own their part of a Kiwi dream. And I have to tell Mr English, once again, they get all the facts wrong and they make them up. The government's not going to build the houses. We're not builders. We're going to have the private sector build the houses. But we're certainly going to front up and stump up and be leading a building policy in this country, the like we haven't seen probably in the last 50 years. And the public of New Zealand welcome a party that's prepared to roll up their sleeves and to face head-on the issues that directly affect them, that affect their lives, that affect their kids, that affect their sense of security and their place in the future, where they belong in this country. And they want a smart, hands-on government. And then we have the Prime Minister, because he's so rattled over this policy, he decides he has to make up figures. So he has been spinning as fast as he can. In fact, he's even enlisted TV3 to help him talk about Labour's policy, while trying to keep the focus off his own pathetic and shonky response to Kiwi Build. And today was a classic. He got caught out today, you see. Who's been spinning the figures? Who hasn't been telling the truth about housing in New Zealand? Unfortunately, it happens to be the Prime Minister. He doesn't even know that in the last few days, his own building and department have said that at Hobsonville, in his electorate, the most expensive land in Auckland on build at the moment, they are going to be able to build 4-bedroom homes, 300 square metres, for under $485,000. What did the Prime Minister say? That's not our policy. Well, unfortunately for him, it's what the Department of Building and Housing says is going to be built on Hobsonville land for the government. Now, if the government can build 4-bedroom houses, 300 square metres, Mr Speaker, that's a pretty big house, 300 square metres for under $485,000, why can a government who's doing a bulk build of 10,000 houses a year build houses for, on average, around 300,000 good, solid first homes for Kiwis? Not 2 bathrooms, 2 en-suites and 3 cars for garages for cars. Good, solid homes. Mr Henry, a little bit like you may have grown up in solid, warm, reliable houses that people can get into and can afford. So why can they build these big flash houses at Hobsonville for $485,000 less than, but they argue this government, this party will not be able to? Well, we've caught him out with his own figures. So what's John Key's response to our policy? Number 1. Sack the hapless minister. Poor old Phil Heatley. You know, he's a nice bloke. He tried hard. He didn't deserve to go because he's not the worst minister. Because the worst minister in living memory has to be Hekia Parata. And there she was sitting cosily today on her front bench cushioned seat, too afraid to answer questions about education, too afraid to open her mouth because what comes out is mumbo-jumbo and bureaucratic speak. It's unintelligible. So what does he do? He appoints Nick Smith. But what else does he do?
Point of order, the
Honourable that was a bit slow.
Yes, it was a bit slow. I'm sorry. I apologise, Mr Speaker, but I don't think that the standing orders allow the courage of a member to be debated in this House.
Oh, I think it's the member didn't use the words, didn't accuse the member of being lacking courage or being gutless or anything. The member said too afraid to answer questions. Now, if we keep ruling out more and more words, I think it's just, I think it's pointless. I mean, I don't think it was. The member's been critical of another member. Members are entitled to do that. Performance of members in this House can be challenged, and I think it was not done in a derogatory way. And I don't want to go ruling out words. Well, members can be, if it's the way it's done that's important. If one goes back over speakers' rulings over all the years, most speakers have objected to when language is used that is clearly derogatory. And I don't want to be ruling out words just because they might be critical of a member, because we've all, I think we end up with too few words to use. The Honourable Annette King.
Mr Speaker, what was the action of the Prime Minister? Sacked poor old Phil Heatley. And then appoint Nick Smith. But not only appoint Nick Smith, he's appointed 2 associate ministers of housing. Never in the history of this parliament have you had to have a minister of housing and 2 associate ministers of housing. And what was interesting is one of the associates spoke yesterday in the debate, the Honourable Tariana Turia. Did she mention housing? Not a word about the most important issue that many New Zealanders face. So we've got Nick Smith, and I have to say that Nick Smith has the opposite effect to the Midas touch. Rather than everything, Mr Speaker, turning to gold, it turns to something distinctly softer and smellier. So, first of all, we get Nick Smith, then we'll get his action plan. And I want you to write it down and I want you to put bets on it, because this is what the plan will be. First, manufacture a crisis. Think ACC, think local government. Then he will lay the blame on everyone and everyone else, but not the government. Think ACC, think local government. And then he'll use make-up figures. Make-up figures, and that, just think about ACC and local government once again. And then he will apply an unworkable, unproven, unnecessary solution. think ACC, think local government. And here is the crisis that he'll manufacture first. It's all local government's fault. They're too expensive, they're too slow, they're too useless. It's all about resource consents. And you heard the Prime Minister, it's taking 6 to 18 months and it's absolutely disgraceful. Well, let's look at the facts. The Ministry for the Environment provides that data to government on resource consents. So do the council's annual plans. They look at the numbers, the types, the time taken. And what do the latest figures show? That 95% of resource consents are processed on time and 0.5% applications are declined. Those are the figures, not the bodgy, made-up figures the Prime Minister has given us over the last week or so, and the very figures Nick Smith will use for his made-up crisis in local government. And then if you search the reports over the last year, go out and research how many reports have there been of consents taking between 6 and 18 months. I found 4 reports over a whole year. One was for a mining project, second one was for a river bridge, the third one was for a power substation, the fourth was a salmon farm, nothing to do with housing. So I say to members, watch this spot. The National Party will attack Labour's policy, shonky figures, made up attack, Nick Smith leading it. Mark my words.
I call the Honourable Dr. Peter Sharples. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, tēnā